Did you
All
record? Okay, there it goes.
Okay. So, hey, everybody, it is Clee Scott with another episode of Retail Therapy with Clee. And I have one of my loves. Y'all know I love friendships, and she is one of my adult friendships. You know, a lot of people don't really meet friends as adults, or they are refused to meet friends as adults, but I love her down. She
Love you
is.
back.
She is an author, a professional, super mom, and a whole lot of other adjectives. So none other than Miss C Sweets. Hello, love.
Hi, how are you, Clee?
I am doing well. I'm doing well, kind of wrapping up my work day. So I want to first thank you for taking the time to meet with me.
No
Um,
problem.
yeah, so how you been? Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year. I've been good. Been busy, but definitely good. Just
Good.
juggling a lot of different things.
Yeah. So in that juggle, I want to talk about your newest endeavor. So your second book called
Yeah.
Thirst. Tell me a
Yes.
little bit about it.
So Thirst is an urban fiction novel, and it is a real good tale from the hood. But what I did was I took some really extreme characters. Everybody, all of us will know somebody like that if we grew up the same way. But I intertwined them together in a really good love story. So.
Really? I
It's
love
some highs and some lows. It's definitely a page turner, but
it.
there's definitely some plot changes in there that switch it up for the reader. So all I can say is you got to read it.
I know, right? What got you into writing books?
Oh, I started writing when I was probably 6, 7, and I think it's because you start writing in school, right? You got to write a story, and when you first get recognized for having the best story, everybody started telling you, "Oh, you're such a great writer."
Mhm.
But it's like I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed literary arts. I enjoyed creative writing, and it just spiraled from there. There was a girl in third grade. She was writing a poetry book, and I'm like, "How are you writing a poetry book and you 8?" So I went and wrote my own poetry book, and I just never stopped. So every year I can remember just writing something big and impactful. Elementary school, I was the poet laureate of my school in sixth grade, and I wrote for all the major assemblies and teacher appreciation days, had my poetry across the school. So it just was something that I started doing. Didn't think I can write a novel until somebody else started writing a novel. And I'm like, oh, one of those things, if you can do it, I can do it too. No competition, just motivation. So it was like I was inspired by other people actually taking those chances. So it's what struck my interest to say, well, I got a lot to write about.
Mm-hmm. What has been the feedback like from no, not the feedback, but what has been the transition from your first book to this second book? Like, has that been looking like?
So the transition was in me. I wrote the first book. I started it when I was 19 years old. So I was a kid. My goal back then was to be the best urban fiction writer because the writers at the time, the Eric Jerome Dickeys, the Terry Woods, the Shannon Holmes, they were older. And even though I enjoyed reading their writing, it was so cliche to a sense because it didn't really get the nitty gritty of the life we live today. It probably resonated for them back in their time, but I didn't think that they were writing current. So I wanted to be the youngest to write it, and I wanted to write it rough. I wanted to write it raw. So when I started that first novel, it was raw. Really a good book, but it was so raw. Um, all these years later, when I picked up my second one, I started writing the second one 2 years ago. And I'm not that writer anymore. I'm not in that environment. I'm not in that hood anymore. I don't have that same inspiration. I still know where I came from and I can still write the story. But I'm also more consciously aware to not write it so raunchy and not to write it so raw because I'm older now, and it's like those things that I wrote back then, I don't have the balls to write them the same way. So I think the transition was my growth and my elevation, but my writing has improved. My writing style has improved. It took me 2 years to write this book. It took me about 7 years to write that last book. So just the knowing what I want and bundling it all up to get a good story done. I think the growth was me. The transition was me.
Mhm. And how does, just I know writing, like I know when I journal, it just releases so much goodness. How does that help you like in your personal and professional, as far as outside of just being an author, but in you are a professional as well as in work and things like that. How does it kind of like translate into that atmosphere?
So I write fiction, so I'm not writing realistically, right? So where it transfers over to me is I set the goal and I accomplish the goal. So as I develop the characters and as I get through the chapter, I'm that much closer to achieving the final project. So it motivates me to just keep it going. It gives me the reinforcement of, I'm on top of my task. And it validates me as a writer. I didn't think I was an author until I actually finished this book. And I'm like, girl, you're a writer. You're an author. And I already had the title, right? But it didn't resonate with me until I finished this one. And when I finished it, it was like, yeah, you're a writer. Like, wow, you're a writer. That's one of your titles. You're a writer. So just the self growth and just knowing that I can achieve it and I can do it and it's no longer just a goal. It's achievable, it's reachable, and it just validates me in all the things that I possess. So if I were writing realistic stuff, it would probably resonate with me better. But what I absolutely love is that it resonates with others too. So
Mhm.
I made it up, I created it, but there's been so much feedback of people who say, that was me.
Yeah.
I'm the character. Oh my gosh, that's how I would have reacted. So, in my writing, I'm doing a lot of psychological development where I'm exposing some things that some people probably don't talk about. And I'm talking about solutions and resolutions, and I'm identifying certain things and behaviors that most people don't really acknowledge. But when you read it in another character in the way that I wrote it, it's going to resonate with you in a way or not. So, you're like, man. I'm not the character, or that may be a fake story, but man, that's my behavior, or that's the behavior of somebody else I know. And man, maybe I should think about it the same way that that character thought about it.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. I know it's fictional, but it's still relative to some people.
Very. Oh,
Yeah,
it's real life. It's fictional because it's not anybody I know. It's not anybody's story.
yeah,
But it can be everybody's story because parts of it, I mean, it's derived from the hood. It's
yeah,
derived from things that can happen. And if they can happen, more than likely they have happened. Just not in my life or to me, but I don't think that people won't be able to resonate with it.
yeah. And then in reading like your bio, of course I know you, but the people who are watching, you are from the South Side of Chicago.
Absolutely, born and raised.
And you have lived in some other areas similar to like Chicago neighborhoods. Elaborate on like that exposure a little bit.
So I left Chicago and I went to North Carolina and I lived in a city called Durham. And Durham has its highs and its lows, totally opposite of Chicago. And the hood is the hood. So you kind of find you find a common culture of who we are as brothers and sisters and how our communities are formulated, but then it also has a different language. So just being able to learn that language I felt like I was born all over again and learning that new culture. We resonate because we all come from the same type of history, but just to see how they cultivated there was a beautiful thing. I left the Carolinas and I went over to Georgia. And just learning the ins and out of Georgia, the highs and lows of Georgia. A lot of people put Atlanta on a map for one particular thing, but outside of Atlanta, like Georgia exists, and
Yeah.
there's so much depth in that state, and there's so much culture and so much history in that state. And every place that I live has its own personality. And now I'm in the DMV area, and I will say I love the DMV. And the DMV has its own culture. It has its own personality. So I think that in the time where I started writing, I've collected, a lot of a lot of understanding as far as why people are who they are and why people do the things they do. And what was similar in all of the environments is, the struggle is real. And, what was different is that everybody's language for their area is different, but the personality of the characters, anybody can say that the book was in their city. I wrote it for Chicago, but it can resonate with all the other cities because I've lived them and I know that, these personalities, these behaviors, these characters, they're all kind of the same.
Yeah. Did you face like any unexpected challenges while writing these narratives, from 19 to currently and from the last 2 years to this book, and just navigating through these different cities?
Oh, plenty. I mean, my first book was gonna be put down and never picked back up. I started writing a book as a teenager. So the first challenge was life. I grew up and I took on the real workforce. So I couldn't stay up late night because I got my creative writing at night. When everything is still is when I can write my butt off. But when I did not have a lot of responsibility, I was able to write through the wee of the morning. But when you start having to clock a real 9 to 5 because you got bills to pay, you got to go to sleep. And then you find very little time to go back and reattach to your passions because you got to make money. So it's like the sacrifice of, do I go do this 9 to 5, even though it's not my passion because I got to eat, or do I sit back and I remain a dreamer? So, the dreamer had to get put away. Then I grew up and I evolved. And like I said, I would pick the book up and I kind of cringed, like, I wrote that, I was a little embarrassed by it. And
Mhm.
it was because the me that I thought I was becoming was opposite of what I was writing. So it turned into a thing that I wrote a book, but I never had the plan of publishing it because I didn't want to be represented by the things that I wrote. And then, as life progressed, I started doing technical writing for work, and I would write for other people, or I would write for my daughter, who's an artist. Like I would do writing still, but I didn't turn that lens back on myself to say, hey, you gotta finish your project. It was just sitting there. Thank God COVID happened. That was another transition. COVID happened, and in COVID, it was that time where we just sat still, right? Like you just still, nobody knew what was happening, nobody knew what was next.
Yeah.
We were just still. And I was at home because I was laid off, and I'm like, you know what? Everybody keep asking me for recipes. Let me start cooking,
Mhm.
right? So I started the cooking like candy show, and I was making meals every
Ah,
single day.
yeah.
I was just
Right.
cooking, freestyling it, just showing people what I do in my kitchen. And cooking like candy had done so well that I wanted to start a cookbook. But I had not known the structure of a cookbook, so I started researching it. And right when I was researching it, one of those companies jumped in and said, "Hey, we can publish your book for you."
Yeah.
And when I started to go over the logistics and the pricing, I said, "Well, I don't have the cookbook ready, but I do have a book that I wrote 16 years ago that I can just push out there." I mean, it was COVID, it
Yeah.
was opportunity. It was like, hey, let me find and connect to the things that I'm passionate about because that's all I got at this point. So it's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing with the real world and with work, but for right now, all I have is the things that are inside of me. So I picked the book back up, and that's how I published that one. Um, I was no longer afraid of what people would think of the writing because I wrote it. I embraced it. It was mine. I wrote it. I embraced it. Surprisingly, everybody absolutely loved it. They loved it so much they wanted another one. Well, the
It did.
problem was I don't have another one in me just yet because I wrote that so long ago. And just to kind of go back into character to connect with those characters, I wasn't there. But it pushed me to say, all right, let's give them something else though, because you have an audience and they want something and you can write and you're a writer. So like let's produce. So I went to the lab and I just started writing overnight. Was it challenging? Yeah, because the more I had to dedicate to my book, the more demanding life got as far as work. And
Yeah.
it was a real true testament of picking up one job, stopping another one, picking up another one. I had enrolled in school to get my master's degree. So I'm juggling work, book, master's degree, work, book, master's degree, on top of all the other things that I have to do as a parent, even though my child is an adult, but it's like I'm still giving and pouring into everything that I can pour into. Is just finding the time to validate what I needed to do. So challenges happen, lots of them, but I stayed focused and I stayed committed because it's what I really truly wanted to do. So I just pushed through to the finish line. And like I said, when I finished that last sentence, it's like, dang, I'm a writer. Like I wrote that.
That, I'm so proud of you. And I always tell you, you and Ty, her daughter, that's like the dynamic duo, mom and daughter. And I love that so much. So if you can give any advice to like not even just the younger generation, but just people who are looking to one, become an author, or to do something outside of their work creatively, what would it be?
Do it. You don't have it until you start it, right? So the difference between wanting to be an author and competing with some of the greatest that I read in me now, the difference was I actually finished the product. I didn't just want to do it, I did it. So a lot of times people come to me and they say, "Hey, I need help. I need you to help me with my book." And I'm like, "Okay, did you write it?" They're like, "No." Well, the first thing you got to do is put it down on paper and you got to commit to it. And once you do that, just with anything else, like it's going to continue to grow. If you build it, it will come because it will. So a lot of things that stop us from reaching those goals is us. Like we want to do it so bad, but we have a reluctance, or I won't even say that we're lazy because I don't believe a lot of us are lazy. I just believe that we hesitate and we're hesitating until we wait for the right moment. Well, you are in control of when that right moment was going to be. When I first started with the first sentence, I never seen what the end sentence would look like. I didn't know. I'm creating as I go. But that's the beauty part. Like you get to create it as you go. So if you didn't like it, erase it. If that sentence didn't flow, delete it, edit your own work. But it's like you won't ever make it to what you want if you don't start it. So my advice is start it. Put
Yeah.
it on paper. That's your goals for your career. That's your goals for money management. That's your goals for future planning. Put it down on paper. It starts with writing it out. You don't have to be a writer, but you got to plan those goals out and then you got to hold yourself to it. And remember, it's okay if it don't work out because you're creating as you go. So you can delete it. You can add new lines. You can create new characters. Everything that you want to do, you can build it, but you won't get there if you don't start.
Yeah, I love that. And that kind of helps me too. We have several conversations just about things of that nature. And I always think of a time when you asked me, like, what are you doing for yourself after I left retail? And I was like, dang, that's a good question. And here we are, retail therapy with Clee. And she will be helping me with my book in the near future, FYI. What would you say about like having a support system?
The support system is real. I think that for every time I needed an editor, for every time I needed motivation, for every time I needed a new set of eyes, I leaned on my friends, and the same way I know that they can always lean on me, knowing that you got somebody you can lean on, it helps you get through it because um, the feedback was 100% valid. Just somebody else picking it up and reading it and enjoying it part way through before it even got done gave me more motivation to want to write more. I had one friend who her name is Stacy, and I was like, yeah, I was trying to look up a motivation coach or accountability coach, and I'm like, this lady talking about give her $2,000 and then retain her on a monthly fee, and I'm like, that's ridiculous, just for you to hold me accountable to my work. And she was like, girl, call me every Thursday. I'll be your accountability coach. So every Thursday she would call me and she'd say, how much did you write? And it turned into a job for me to make sure I had something written for her because she's invested now. So it's like when you think about a support system, man, it's really impactful and it's really important because a lot of times, like I asked you, what are you doing for you? It's so easy for us to show up for other people, but it's sometimes hard for us to show up for ourselves. So when my support system held me down as far as wanting what's next, telling me, hey, I just read my best friend. I sent it to her. She like, I finished the next 18, chapter 18. Send me the next one. It's like I didn't have the next one done,
Yeah.
but I got to get it done because I got somebody else who's waiting on that. And that gave me the drive to keep pushing. And if you think that you can do things alone, you can. But, a lot of that psychologically, we want to impress.
Yeah.
So it's best to get a group of people who are really rooting for you and cheering for you, and then you put on the show for them. Flip side of that, you also need another support system that's not your friends, because
Mhm.
your friends gonna tell you what you want to hear, and it's not because that's what they think they're doing. It's because you're friends. So a lot of your like-mindedness is the same. If
Yeah.
you say blue Skittles, more than likely they like blue Skittles too because you're friends. Like so, the things you like, they tend to like too. So you want to find another type of support system. You may have to pay for them and get you some true eyes and some true editors and some true people who are now hired to push your project through. And they're only giving it to you from their lenses and it's unbiased because they don't know you. But now you get self-corrected because it's like, dang, I don't agree with that, but you're right. Or, oh, I like that. I thought that was good. But you know what? Coming from another point of view, maybe I need to change that a little bit to make it this way. So, um, to your question, the support system matters. Whether it's your friends or it's outside people that you hire, you definitely need the support to kind of push you through.
Copy that. Thank you. So what can we expect next? What you got going on with Thirst? I know that there is a book signing.
I have a book signing January 11th in Chicago at Mimi's Crafted Restaurant on Taylor Street. So, um, I will have a book signing event where you can just come in, meet me, get your book signed. So if you haven't bought your book, you can buy your book beforehand, or you can buy it from me there, and I will be there to personally sign it from 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock. But at 3 o'clock, we're going to start the Q&A because when I did with my last novel, we had an open forum and the questions were rolling, the feedback was rolling. These people love these characters like they live next door to them. So they had questions and I had answers and just that level of energy that was being reciprocated for the passion of my book from other people made the room so much more vibrant and it was impactful for everybody. People were resonating with characters and it was dope. So we're going to do a Q&A book review from 3 to 5 and hopefully I get to answer all the questions and just hear the fan favorites or the feedback because that's what motivates me. And from there, I click, maybe I'll pick up that first book for a sequel next or start a new project next. I don't know. I gotta sit back and harp on it and let it come to me.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I love it. So Mimi's Saturday, January 11th,
Saturday, January 11th
1
is
to
the
3.
meet and
Okay.
greet and book signing.
Okay, cool beans. Make sure y'all come. Those are in the Chicagoland area. And again, you're gonna harp on, no, you're gonna bask right now in the present. And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
you know,
I want to let
organize
the
with the
book
fans.
flow.
Yeah.
Want to see what it does organically. I have done very minimal marketing and shame on me. That's my area of opportunity. But the word of mouth marketing has been so good
Yeah.
that I kind of just let it ride out on that. But I will do some more investing into the project to get it done. But the best marketing for me is to just keep writing books because my first book didn't get to sell the first book, but the second book got to sell the first book. So once they pick up book number two, they're definitely going after book number one if they didn't have it. Kind of sort of the same. Once they bought book number one, they were looking forward to book number two. So book number three is going to bring me a new audience, I'm sure, and it's going to definitely birth more sales for book one and two. But for right now, I'm just real still. I'm floating on book two right now because we're in our beginning phase and we're still birthing what this book can do.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, I know it's gonna do absolutely great. If you had one chapter for those who already have the book or who are going to get the book before they see you on the 11th, what would it be? One chapter that you would say, man, y'all gotta really read that.
My favorite chapter is Date Night. It was probably the one that I enjoyed writing the most.
Okay. And why?
Yeah. It was date night. So it was just so many different dynamics in both characters, the both main characters. So that would be my favorite one. But I'm unbiased. I like all of them equally. I mean, even some of my editors, they're like, "Oh, you could delete this chapter." I'm not deleting nothing.
Ah,
So, I would go back and forth with my editors because I'm not deleting the chapter. I can enhance it or I can give more detail. But
mhm.
each chapter to me was special. So, I'm not biased. I like them all the same. I actually like all the characters the same, and I would defend every single last one of those characters because
Period.
some of them are perceived in the wrong light. But it is what it is. So, uh, I would stick with date night because that's the chapter I think a lot of people read to get to that point to see how did we get here.
Okay, gotcha. Outside of getting the book from you this Saturday, where can they find both books? And what's the name of your first book? Tell
The
everyone that.
first book is called Being Greedy. Being Greedy by C Sweets. Both books, Being Greedy and Thirst, are available on Amazon. They're also available on at Barnes and Nobles. If you search Being Greedy or Thirst by C Sweets in your search engine, you're going to see them sold in other platforms. Other retailers have picked them up. Walmart has picked it up. Target has picked it up online. A lot of booksellers have picked them up online, and you'll be able to purchase them through those different channels. Or you can go to my website, give me all of the royalties first and foremost.
Yep.
And my website is Thirst by C Sweets. And hold on, let me not chop and screw this up. Thirst by C Sweets dot square dot site, and it's going to take you directly to my square site for my book, and you can make purchases. Both books can be purchased there. So
Okay, awesome. And if the people would like to follow Miss C Sweets, how can they do that?
Instagram, I am author underscore C underscore sweets. And Facebooks, I am author C Sweets. You can follow me on there. And there's a lot of book review stuff that happens on those pages. So, spoiler alert, you may see something that you don't want to see. But if you want to stay in tune and involved, all of the information is posted on both of those handles.
Oh, well, Miss C Sweets, thank you again, friend, for
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I thank you for just highlighting me. And you're awesome. But that's what you do, right?
thank you.
You just do awesome stuff.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I will be talking to you Saturday. Bloop.
Talk to you Saturday. Can't wait.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.